I don't believe men were created to be pawns in someone else's game. I believe we were created to be steward kings. Men under authority, yes, but entrusted with real responsibility. Not perfect men, but disciplined ones. Men who rule themselves, serve God directly, and refuse to live in fear. This is king, not pawn. One of the most exhausting things about our world right now is that everything has become an us versus them. Every single issue, conversation, every headline, you're expected to pick a side immediately. No hesitation, no nuance, no thought. And if you don't, all of a sudden you're suspicious and maybe the bad guy now too. If you say both sides are partly right and partly wrong, you're actually accused of weakness. And if you refuse to hate the other side, you're accused of betrayal. But here's the truth that most people just don't want to hear these days. Forcing men to choose a side is one of the fastest ways to make them stop thinking. Because two things can be true at the same time, and this is something that our culture has completely forgotten. Okay, one side can be right about a problem and wrong about the solution. Another side can be wrong in spirit, but right in the way that they're reacting to it. Reality is very rarely clean, cut, and dry, and truth is just as rarely ever owned by one group or one side. But zeal, especially unchecked zeal, it doesn't tolerate complexity. It just demands allegiance. And when you have zeal without wisdom, that turns into violence. And here's the danger with that. Because when men become committed to a side, more to that side directly than to the truth, they stop being governed by the Spirit of Christ. And instead they become governed by an identity. My side must win. My side must dominate. My side must silence the other. And at that point, it's no longer what matters what is good, only what advances the team. And that's not righteousness. I think we can all agree. That's tribalism. And when Christ came here, he didn't come to build teams. He came to build people. Jesus didn't just show up and say, pick a side. He said, follow me. He didn't take the side of the religious elite, and he certainly didn't take the side of the political rebels. He actually confronted both. Why? Well, that's because his allegiance was not to factions. It was to truth and to restoration. That made him virtually impossible to control, and it's also what got him killed. I think once you see this, you won't really be able to unsee it. Okay, so you guys, you go home at night, you watch the news, you scroll social media, and you realize, every story is framed to make you angry at someone. Not reflective, not discerning, but reactive. You're not being informed, you're being mobilized in a way, and mobilized men are easier to aim. I want to introduce this concept to you guys, and it's that peacemaking is not the same as passivity. I know it's been something that's been preached, but there is a key difference here. They understand what Jesus was saying completely. Peacemaking is not avoiding conflict, and it's also not pretending that evil doesn't exist. And it's not a moral compromise either, because Jesus obviously never tolerated evil, but he did refuse to dehumanize. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God, Matthew 5:9. Notice something important. He does not say peace lovers, he says peacemakers. Peace has to be made, and that takes strength. Oftentimes, men, we confuse the idea of conquest with leadership. Okay, our culture, it really does worship conquest, winning, dominating, crushing the other side. But conquest is easy when you don't care about what's left afterward. Unity is actually harder because it requires restraint, discernment, mercy, courage. Anyone can tear anything down. Very few men can actually hold opposing people together without becoming corrupt. Because at the end of the day, with what we see, that social media story I told you about, the media thrives on division. That's not accidental, because the divided people are easier to manipulate. They're easier to scare, they're easier to sell to, they're easier to control. And the very concept of unity threatens systems that profit from that chaos. So that's why men are constantly told, choose your enemy, pick your tribe, and never listen. Because slowly, even brothers will become adversaries. I mean, everything is so loud, right? Everyone's shouting, everyone's convinced their way is the right way, but no one is actually taking the time to slow down and listen. And in all that noise, the man who refuses to hate, that's the kind of guy that's going to stand out immediately. Not because he's weak, but simply just because he's not possessed. Christ-like men, they call out evil everywhere that they see it. And here's the balance that matters. Leading like Jesus does not excuse evil just because it comes from our side. It also doesn't demonize people for being wrong. It calls out corruption wherever it appears without hatred, and that requires a really special form of internal strength, because it means, like, you will almost disappoint everyone at some point. Unity is not just full-scale agreement across the board. It's actually just alignment, because unity doesn't require everybody to think the same. It just requires everyone to be aligned towards truth, justice, goodness, restoration. A united people can totally disagree fiercely on things without actually turning on each other. A divided people can't agree on anything except to hate. I think that's where we now get into this topic of discussing the difference between a king and a conqueror, because history makes this very clear. The most feared rulers were the conquerors. The most remembered rulers were good kings. Conquerors ruled through fear, good kings ruled through trust. Conquerors expanded a territory, while good kings actually elevated their citizens, elevated their people. One leaves ruins, the other leaves legacy. True strength, it's not loud. It steps between the innocent and the violent, and it absorbs the cost itself. It refuses to escalate chaos, and honestly, that's the kind of strength that it does not go viral, but it does change lives. As men, one of the greatest responsibilities we have is not to conquer our enemies, but to reconcile brothers, to say, look, we don't have to hate to be honest. We don't have to dominate to be strong. And we certainly don't have to choose sides to choose Christ. That posture terrifies the very system that's built on outrage. However, this is not without requiring some internal work. Okay, so let's be clear. This kind of leadership requires mastery over anger, control over your ego, and patience under accusation, and the ability to have courage when there is going to be no applause, because you will be misunderstood and you will be labeled. That's going to be the cost of refusing to be weaponized. The world does not need more conquerors. It has plenty. It needs men who can stand in truth without becoming cruel, men who can name evil without losing love, and men who unite instead of divide, not by compromise, but by Christ-likeness. This is king, not pawn. Do not let the world turn you into a weapon when God is calling you to become a peacemaker. Strength that divides is easy. Strength that unites is rare. Be the rarer